Thank you very much for attending this webinar where I have the opportunity to share Skanska's ESG approach. My name is Dávid Hoffer. I'm a project manager in the development stream of Skanska. And I would like to thank to ABSL, our strategic partner, for the opportunity to talk about ESG and Skanska. First, I will share with you the framework behind our ESG strategy. And I will also explain some of our best practices that we use in our daily operations. As I work in project management, I will touch more deeply those elements of ESG that I work the most with. It's like green solutions, health and safety, or community investments. It is always interesting when we talk about ESG because ever since I joined Skanska, I joined already a corporate culture where we were practicing these principles. We spent enormous amount of time with discussing how to make our projects more climate friendly, how to reduce CO2, what materials we should use in our buildings, how can we make our sites more safe for our workers, partners, colleagues, and even how we can make a project safe and user-friendly for our tenants. And then a year ago too, for all those principles and values that are so core of our corporate culture, we just started using this acronym ESG. And these are the principles that I'm going to talk about today. I would start for an intro with this quote. It's an ancient Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times. And unfortunately, this is very valid today. Like it or not, we live in very interesting times, which are very full of uncertainty. And why am I saying this? Is for several years now, we can all observe these climate anomalies that are happening around the globe. We have fires, floods, droughts, and our climate is changing. And what we see is actually shocking us. Climate change is here, and it's probably the greatest threat to our financial stability. And its impact is felt by all companies, individuals, organizations, states, practically everyone. And we started to fight the climate change, and I think the last 5 years of, the past 5 years, or even more 7 years, were about how to tackle this climate change and what are the actions we can make. And then another crisis entered our lives, which was COVID-19. And maybe there was a shift or some shift of the attention more to the importance of healthcare as the pandemic came. And unfortunately came with a very significant human toll and probably affected the life of most of us. And the pandemic showed us how interconnected we are. For economic perspective, we saw also businesses shutting down or suspending their operations, and very, very serious supply chain issues. But then vaccination started, and it seemed that we are getting out of this crisis. And when we finally started to see some light at the end of the tunnel, we faced another tragedy, which was the war in Ukraine. And the war started in February, but we still do not see where is the end. And the full effects of that geopolitical situation brought about a lot of uncertainty to our lives, to the life of organizations, to the life of individuals. And most probably, we will go through this period with some recession. But uncertainty and inflation is projected to stay with us for a while. And this is different from what we got used to in the previous decade. Another thing we know already is that these are probably uh, factors that bring the importance of sustainability or ESG to the next level. On the hand, the war highlighted the importance of S for social impact that corporations and investors are making, supporting employees, supporting communities, refugees. The importance of G, just think about the sanctions, the unprecedented focus on transparency, uh, that the sanctions that were introduced and the immediate response of the international community. Those sanctions that we also have to take into account when we make the business. And the importance of E, especially because of the energy transformation, because we see that we are so much energy dependent. I mean, especially talking about the EU and Hungary, we are so much energy dependent that we have to speed up this transformation, preferably towards the renewable and alternative energy sources, towards a more sustainable world. So we all hope that these terrible times will pass soon. So what I hope will stay with us is this enhanced awareness of positive ESG impact that we can make as corporations. And now, what does ESG stand for? Well, I actually touched it in the slides before, but just shortly. So the environmental criteria, the social criteria, which is how organizations treat their employees or how they affect the local communities, and the governmental criteria, which is very much on transparency and such related topics. And we talk about these topics separately many times, but actually they are interconnected. So there is no E and S and G eventually, because we talk about environment, for example, environmental risk management, which involves governmental and environmental aspects, or sustainable developments, which have implications from environmental and social perspective, and it benefits the local communities. Or we talk about gender equality and lack of discrimination, which may be a social aspect on one hand, and it has governance implications as well in the corporations. So first, I would like to suggest to take a look at the legislation that is behind ESG, and then we will move on how it is reflected on the company level. Let's start with the Paris Agreement. These countries have been debating how to combat, how to tackle the climate change since 1980s, 1990s. But then we had to wait until 2015 to see the most significant climate agreement born. And this was the Paris Agreement. And it requires all countries to set emission-related pledges. It was adapted actually by 196 parties, the COP21 in Paris in 2015. And the goal is to limit global warming preferably to 1.5 degrees Celsius, and additionally to achieve net zero by 2050. And the Paris Agreement was followed by the European Green Deal, which was the EU's strategy how to tackle climate change. And it is based on the strategy set by the Paris Agreement. And the goal of the EU was to become the first climate neutral continent by 2050, which will result in cleaner environment, more affordable energy, smarter transport, new jobs, and overall a better quality of life. It would be achieved by the reduction of emission of greenhouse gases by 55% and increase the share of renewables and energy efficiency. And it was followed by the EU taxonomy, because there was this tool missing in the EU, a tool that was to help and understand, classify, measure, and report in a consistent and, more importantly, a comparable way how we progress towards the net zero future. And it was also necessary to set certain measures in order to avoid greenwashing. And according to the EU taxonomy, an activity can be named sustainable if it proactively supports one of the 6 objectives and not impacting negatively another remaining 5. So there are like 6 objectives, like climate change mitigation, climate change adaptation, transition to circular economy, and so on. So you have to pick one that is relevant to your business and implement that in your strategy, but not negatively impacting the rest of the 5. And that was the idea behind the taxonomy. And additionally, obligatory non-financial reporting is also introduced with the EU taxonomy for the biggest market players from 2022, and it will be expanded from 2023. So it's very useful to be aware of what is included in the taxonomy. And as the EU realized that the Green Deal did not have as an effect that was expected, the next step was the Fit for 55. And the EU decided to revise several documents and regulations to reach the goal of 2030 to reduce emissions. So within this package, several regulations were precise and strengthened. And as you can see, what we have here on the slide, these are mostly related to real estate. I would just highlight the share of renewables in buildings to 49%, or the pace of renovation to at least 3%. We have a really old building stock in the EU, and especially in Central Eastern Europe. So, and the building industry plays a very important role in the carbon emissions or greenhouse gas emissions, because 40% of all emissions are coming from this industry. So when you buy assets, you should remember that they play a very important role in your company's ESG strategy. And it can be a strong physical reflection of your sustainability strategy, your commitment, if you really focus on these elements. And there's one more topic related to the background or the framework, and this is the UN goals, the UN agenda, the 2030 agenda for achieving a better future. The UN has set up 17 sustainable goals, which clearly define a world that we want to live in. These are like, poverty or reduction in inequalities, gender equality, focus on marine life, and this was actually adopted by 193 member states of the UN in 2015. And it results from a process that was very inclusive, because governments involved business, the civil society, even citizens. And it seemed like there's a common agreement on where the world should go. And also fulfilling by these ambitions, it will take a huge effort by all sectors of the society, and business and corporations have to play a very important role here. So it is also a way how you can actually structure your ESG strategy on a company level. But then let's see how we work with these on the company level, and what is how the implementation goes. And probably one of the key aspects here is what gets measured gets done, because the idea is that you cannot control something that you don't measure. So how we should do the measurement, how it should be done, and how we can create our targets. And for this, there's this ASBTI, the Science-Based Targets Initiative. And in 2015, this was actually launched to translate the Paris goals to something that companies can implement themselves. And the goal of the SBT is to enable companies to set up targets to reduce their emissions. And they are aligned with science, so they are comparable, well structured, and well measured. And they are not, the SBT is not setting up the targets for you, but they are providing a tool. They give you the process so you can set your proper targets, and then they confirm whether the targets you set are aligned with the Paris Agreement and are aligned with science. And by 2021, over 2,000 companies, I must say, including Skanska and other companies around in 60 countries of the globe, were already participating in this science-based target initiative. So why are they science-based? So they are science-based if they align with the latest climate science themes that are necessary to meet the goals of the Paris Agreements. Maybe what I would also add here that SBT started recently to add the net zero standard, because there was a lot of greenwashing and inconsistency in the measurements. And for example, companies took into consideration not only CO2 or only CO2 and not all greenhouse gases, or only own emissions and not the entire value chain, and so on. So the SBT now has 4 elements that make this net zero framework. One of them was the first one of them, as you said, short-term targets for 5 to 10 years. And then the long-term targets that are aligned with the 1.5 degree target. And there's the third element that is to act beyond your value chain, so outside your operation. You should also take action to help and educate the society to move to net zero. And the fourth element is to neutralize all the remaining emissions that are left after 2050. And actually, all the companies that set up the targets outperform. So they are reducing the emissions faster than previously anticipated. To sum it up, just shortly go through the advantages of these SBT, science-based targets. First of all, it makes the business sense. It future-proofs the growth. It's more efficient, brings efficiency to the organization, so it saves money, and takes advantages of the opportunities in the low carbon transition. And it's also a good way to anticipate the regulatory and policy developments, because we see that policies, regulations are always changing and always getting more and more tough. So it also helps the organizations to kind of follow or go ahead to mitigate this transition risk. And finally, it is also a good opportunity to address expectations from stakeholders like companies, employees, customers. Actually, investors prefer to see that these risks are covered. So what I mentioned, for example, regulatory changes. For example, we work with real estate, which is a long-term investment. So we have to think long-term, whether we will comply with the regulatory requirements. And investors prefer to see that these risks are covered on the long term. And when we have the targets set, we should start disclosing them. And for that, we have CDP, which is one of the largest global platforms to disclose data and targets. And a lot of investors actually already require companies that they are investing in to disclose their targets via this platform. And CDP is kind of based on climate-related financial disclosure. So now more than ever, as we see it, capital markets need comprehensive and high quality and comparable information from companies on their impact on the climate change. So CDP has the largest environmental database in the world, and CDP scores are widely used to drive investment and procurement decisions. And including large financial institutions, actually, including BlackRock, Amundi, Allianz, BNP Paribas, require disclosure through the CDP platform. And companies are asked to disclose their targets and data, and that by completing the CDP's questionnaire on climate change and forests and water security, companies will identify ways to manage their own environmental risks and opportunities, and provide vital information back to their customers and investors. And there are actually a few tangible benefits that you can gain by responding to these stakeholder needs. First of all, you can protect and improve your company's reputation, which means you can build trust through transparency, that you show your data and you respond to the rising environmental concerns among the public. You can also gain a competitive edge when it comes to performance on the stock market. And with that, you can access to capital, you can win more tenders, you can get better financing or get financing in general. Already mentioned, but you can get ahead of regulations, so you can prepare your business for mandatory environmental reporting in the future, or you will be fully aligned with the best practice climate-related recommendations. You can additionally uncover risks and opportunities, because you can identify those environmental risks that you have within your operations, and you can also find those opportunities that might come on the way. Not last but not least, you can benchmark your environmental performance against your industry peers, and thus receive feedback on your progress each year. So what is important here, I think, it is a third-party verified data. So it's like what I could compare with, it's like a credit rating in the financial world. But it is more related to the environmental aspects of your operations. And then there is another way to create your strategy, which is aligning it to the UN goals and those 17 areas. It is also a clear way to show others how you approach the sustainability agenda. And each of the areas, you can design the actions that you want to implement. And within the 17 goals, you will find all the aspects of ESG. So they are recognized worldwide by all countries, and there are many companies that also are following the UN goals. So that's also a good way. And as a food for thought, I would like to draw your attention to the Responsible Investment Report. This is a report that was created by ThinkCo, and Skanska was also a co-creator of this report. And it is a good summary of all the regulations and best practices, trends on the market. So if you are interested, feel free to download this report from the ThinkCo webpage and learn more about the regulations and also trends and best practices. And then let's see how we do it in Skanska. Well, you might know a few things about Skanska. I would just highlight, we are one of the largest project development and construction companies, and we operate in selected markets in the Nordics, UK, US, and of course Central Eastern Europe. And as regards sustainability, it has been our group strategy for many years. It's actually not just a strategy, it is deeply instilled in our organization. So this is something we discuss every day, how to make our buildings more energy efficient, what solutions we should use, what materials we should use that comply with the certification systems that we use. And I will talk about these a little bit more in detail. As I mentioned, SBTi, we also have our accredited climate targets, and we are committed to reduce the global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Actually, we were the first company from our sector to get this accreditation, and we are actually doing pretty good, which means that by now we have managed to reduce our emissions. And here I mean the emissions related to our own operation to 46%. So actually we have decided to be even more aggressive on our climate target and to aim to reduce our emissions by 70% by 2030. So instead of the previous 50%, we are going for 70%. But there we have the emissions that are coming from the supply chain. And this is a more difficult question. There we are still aiming for 50%. So we are working in the building industry, and our supply chain has a lot of emissions as well. So we are really working on that to reduce the emissions coming from the supply chain. And I think, and I'm sure that in order to reach such a target, we need the right partners and partnerships. We need disclosure to get the information. And in the Central Eastern European market, this is still not that easy because we have a lot of subcontractors in the building industry, but the awareness is still on a lower level. So, but we are working on that in order to raise this awareness and also to get our subcontractors, partners aware of our climate targets, and also that we are trying to push them to also reach and go for such targets. As I mentioned before, we have reduced our emissions by 46%, and what I would also highlight here that 84% of our commercial buildings have some kind of certification. It may be a LEED or WELL or BREEAM certifications, and actually other buildings probably, so this is the official figure that we have for LEED and WELL and BREEAM, but other buildings we are usually having these certifications, and maybe some local, they use some local certifications. And then in our buildings, we have right now, compared to the current legislation, we are 30% below. And I would like to also highlight that this is a moving target. So as the regulations are and the legislation is getting more and more strict and tougher, this number is going below. So maybe a few years before it was like 40% or 50%, but the regulation changed. So now we are 30% below the current legislation. And how we measure our impact. And this is actually a screenshot from our sustainability report. So our annual report, where we show how much carbon we emit, our operations emit. And this is shown in compared to the amount of revenue that we have. So how many tons of CO2 emissions we have per 1 million Swedish crowns of revenue. As you can see on the graph, it's actually going down as well. Maybe just to shortly note, we here measure the scope 1 and scope 2, and this is related to our own operations. Scope 1 is mostly the emissions, the direct emissions coming from company vehicles and facilities, and scope 2 is related to the indirect emissions from everyday operations, electricity and such. And what we are working on really hard is the whole embodied carbon and operational carbon of the products we sell, which would be scope 3, and that is coming from the supply chain. We have our sustainability report. Actually, from since 1997, we've been reporting our sustainability progress, and since 2019, this is part of our annual report. We are very proud that we have been ranked already twice in the Fortune's magazine Change the World list. Actually, we reached the rank of 17, and we are very proud of that, already twice in a row. We are working on that and to keep this or even improve in this ranking. It's especially we are so proud because actually we are the only company from our sector to be on this in this list. And then let's touch the sustainable ratings that we have. We use a multiple disclosure, so our investors and partners can check our ranking and track our progress. I already touched CDP and the science-based targets. So if you go to CDP website, you can check that Skanska has an A- rating, for example. And I would also highlight the Global Real Estate Sustainability Benchmark, the GRESB, where we reached the top ranking within our category. So we are a global sector leader as office developers. And investors buying assets can compare how developers do their business. So these are very useful tools when buying an asset or you're looking for a partner to support your sustainability and ESG agenda. So you can also track and check their current status. And then ESG, or how we call it in Skanska, it's sustainability. And it includes here in Skanska topics like health and safety, which is a very core part of our operations, transparency, diversity and inclusion, and the partnerships to innovate, which I would highlight again. So it is key for our success in this climate journey to find the right partners with whom we can achieve those goals together. Because as we see it alone, we are not able to succeed. And even though we are pushing the market, the transition is not going fast. But as soon as we find the right partners, those innovations will happen much faster as we work together.
and it would involve the whole value chain. And that is why it's very important to disclose the data, because you might exclude yourself from potential corporations if you don't do so. And as I said, we are a developer. We think long term. So we really focus on developing climate resilient urban spaces. So because what we develop today will stay there for many, many years. So it has to comply also the regulations later on. And if we touch the certain areas of ESG, starting with the E, actually, from environmental perspective, we run awareness campaigns for mostly for our employees and some for our business partners as well. And here we touch topics like what is circular economy, what are the best practices right now in the sector, and what are the best practices that we use in our operations, what solutions we have in our projects, maybe mechanical solutions or other technical solutions, architectural solutions that make our buildings more energy efficient, greener, and such. And then we have the LEED certification, which we do in all of our projects, and it has several layers. So even when choosing the plot, we are going for brownfield plots, not greenfield plots. Our projects must be well communicated with transport. They have to be energy efficient. We work on water efficiency. It's not just the amount of water we use, but for example, the type of water we use. So we aim for using of gray water, which means like water from rainwater, or we use certain amount of soil water. Actually, we try to use a lot of greenery in order to avoid the heat island effects around our projects. And then in the interior of our projects, we are focusing on materials that are healthy. We focus on access to daylight, so that there is more daylight and less need for artificial lighting, enhanced quality, also proper ventilation, fresh and clean air. So there's multiple criteria that we have to meet in these certification levels, and mostly we are going for the higher levels, so at least gold, or actually in our latest projects we are aiming for LEED Platinum, which is the highest level of LEED certification. And then we have the WELL certification, which is more focused on the comfort, internal comfort of building users, that they have fresh food available, that they have good quality water available, clean water, clean air, that they have acoustic comfort and enough light, and such. And then we are trying to reduce our carbon emissions, and this is most related to the value chain. So we use as much as possible low carbon solutions. We already see some progress on the market as well. So for example, concrete and steel and two other great areas, or aluminium, where we have the largest emissions, because these are the materials that require a lot of energy for the production. So here we already achieved to reduce to a certain extent on the concrete, because the subcontractor or the supplier might use renewable energy for the production of cement, and that way we can also reduce our emissions. Or lower emission aluminium facade. We have actually these solutions already implemented in our Budapest H2O project, that they reuse the aluminium. So by reusing the aluminium, it doesn't require that much energy. So it's a lower carbon solution. We're also trying to shift toward wood. That's a bit tricky because of the fire safety regulations. And besides all these, we are looking for other climate smart solutions. For example, we have this green concrete solution, which is able to clean the air and absorb the nitrogen oxide that is also part of the emission of cars from the air. And here I would highlight again partnerships. We need partnerships to accelerate this green transformation. Just a few examples of our campaign. This was mostly for our employees and internal webinars. The green certification lead that I talked about. You can see there are a lot of aspects that we have to consider here. Location, water saving, public transportation, LED lighting, gray water use, recycled materials as much as possible, green roofs, facilities for cyclers, to make these projects more user-friendly, to enhance the user experience, and also do something for our sustainability agenda. And then the shift towards nature, we are using a lot of green, especially I will talk about a little bit in placemaking around our projects, and we are also trying to move towards timber and the use of wood. It's a bit tricky because of the fire safety regulations, and right now in Hungary we have probably the toughest and strictest high fire safety regulations in the region. But wherever possible, we would choose wood as a material. And actually, in one of our projects, not in Hungary, but in Prague, so not far from us, there's already a project under design which has a wooden structure. So fingers crossed that we can go on this way and progress. And then moving on to the social aspect of ESG, we are running various campaigns for our employees. Safety Week, for example, it's not just employees, it's also for subcontractors. Health and safety is very important, and we want everyone to work safe and have proper working conditions on our sites. So we pay a lot of attention to achieve those goals. I already touched the WELL certification to a certain extent. We also focus on support inclusive buildings. So we are trying to limit the barriers as much as possible. We certify our buildings with the local access for use certification. We actually already do an audit already of the design, and then we already implement or execute the buildings accordingly and get the certification. We support and encourage different networks in the company. We run educational campaigns to promote diversity and inclusion, to provide all our employees psychological safety so that everyone to feel safe. Our staff is gender balanced, and we work to eliminate pay gaps even in this male-dominated industry. And as I mentioned, placemaking, which is part of an S and part of an E, it means the cooperation with the local community. We would like to give something to the community once we make our developments, especially if it's a large-scale development. We aim for sustainable neighborhood developments to create more greenery in the area. These are just some ideas from our Safety Week. This is a great event, and it is really aimed for raising the awareness of our colleagues and subcontractors. Diversity and inclusion trainings to ensure that everyone feels safe and included. And this was a response for the war in Ukraine, the coming of refugees. This is actually a project, a building that was not used that we had in Warsaw. So we helped where we could, and we turned it into a shelter. And there was a similar initiative in Prague where we also had a building that was not used. And for placemaking, these are just some of the photos from our projects that we used. More greenery is also accessible to the public, so they can use these functions that we also implement in these gardens or around the projects. And then we have this Care for Life office concept. This was actually our response to the pandemic, that we all want our people to feel safe in the offices. So this is the Care for Life office concept that we call it, and we want to make sure that actually you can go through the building without with contactless solutions. So you have enhanced fresh air, we have UV lamps and that are sanitizing the air. We have proper level of humidification, and there are other elements that actually you can choose also for tenant premises. These are just some of the examples. These are photos from our projects or from our office, how we use these solutions. This is a photo from the lobby of Nordic Light Trio. You can also see the green and the wood, use of wood there. And the cycling facilities in order to for people to facilitate the foster the commuting by bikes instead of public transport. And then we have the Connected by Skanska, which is our technological response to client needs, and it is to enhance user experience in our buildings. We have, for example, this virtual reception. You can invite your guests through this app. They can park their car in the garage, and they can get to your premises just using their mobile phone with their QR code. But you can use it for other solutions, just like adjusting the temperature in your office spaces, or you can use it for car sharing. These are some of the features that that can make your life easier within the office building. This is the scheme of one of the apps that we use. And regarding the governmental area, we have the supplier code of conduct that is applicable and required to be followed by our employees and throughout our whole value chain, actually, because this is an annex to all our contracts to our subcontractors. The Skanska values must be followed. We also have a lot of discussions with our colleagues. We have this so-called value moments regularly, where we discuss ethical dilemmas. We have ethical committee as well. So there is a whole system built up on making sure that all ethical rules of Skanska are followed. We have very strong anti-bribery and sanction policies. We do a lot of sanction checks with everyone we work with, including business partners or supply chain. We are transparent and we expose ourselves to audits from external organizations as well. And as I mentioned, we've been reporting our sustainability journey for nearly 25 years. We are getting to the end of the presentation, so I would like to draw your attention to our locations in Central Eastern Europe. If you would like to cooperate with us in order to fulfill your ESG or climate goals, you are more than welcome to reach out to our colleagues in Budapest or in the rest of the markets, Prague, Bucharest, or 7 cities in Poland. Thank you very much for listening to me. I know it was not a short presentation. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Thank you very much, Dávid. Anyone has questions? If not, I would like to thank you again for this fantastic presentation.